Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of This Is HCD. My name is Gerry Scullion, and I'm a human-centered service design practitioner based in the wonderful city of Dublin, Ireland. In this episode, we are joined with Rachel Knight. Rachel Knight is a fantastic freelance design researcher based in Wellington, New Zealand. Now, there are three powerful takeaways for me in this one. The first one is researcher well-being, which is one of the key reasons why myself and Rachel originally connected. And Rachel speaks candidly about the emotional weight of design research and the toll that it can take on us as practitioners when we do it, and how it's really important to set up the right support for both design teams and practitioners. Number two, we talk about the freelancer realities. We explore the unique risks and responsibilities as a freelance researcher, especially in sensitive social contexts. And then the third point is human-first reflection. Rachel shares how she's learned to identify personal red flags, pace herself, and make self-care non-negotiable. If you work in design, research, service design, human-centered design, or care deeply about the ethics of engaging with people's lived experience, this conversation is just for you then. Hit subscribe, share it with your team, and let's build a more human-centered practice. I know you're going to enjoy it. Rachel is awesome. Let's jump straight in. Rachel Knight, delighted to have you on the podcast. We've been messaging back and forth for a couple of weeks. I think it's been a couple of weeks. I saw your post. It was actually 4 weeks ago. And once I saw it, I was like, yeah. But let's start off. Maybe tell a little bit about yourself, where you're from and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I will start with my pipiha, or my introduction in Māori, if that's okay.
Nice.
So, ko waio, who am I? Ko mauka te re te mauka, ko rakahiri te awa, ko tuahiwi te marae, ko kai tuahiri te hapu, ko kai tahu te iwi, ko Rachel Knight tōku i kua. So what I said is I'm Rachel, and I whakapapa or have lineage to the South Island tribe of Ngāi Tahu, down in Ōtautahi, Christchurch.
Nice.
But I grew up in the opposite end of the island, in the North Island, around Kirikiri and Whangārei, and I now live in the beautiful Porirua in Wellington. So I love living here with my husband and my cat, who we've already talked about. And I'm a freelance design researcher. So I've been freelancing for about 2 years now in the social impact sector. And my background is in design, both in agencies, in charity, and in a small social impact agency as well. So yeah,
amazing. That's the first time on the podcast we've had Māori spoken.
Really?
So I'm so proud to be able to, because I look at everything that's in New Zealand and how they've handled all of the kind of I'm trying to think of the word, the repatriarchy, or the
re-indigenization, maybe.
Yeah, I've made a hames of that, but yeah, the whole they've treated the amalgamation, if you want, of the cultures, because I see that around the world. And when I was in Australia, I'd spoken to many of the governments about the work that they do in that space, and I'm sure it's not perfect, but it's just great to hear somebody start a podcast off by acknowledging the former peoples of New Zealand, So I'm going to go by the colonial name of Wellington. You're based in Wellington.
Cool.
And I'm embarrassed to go by that name because I'm Irish, and I'm trying to shed as much colonial skin as possible in my own life. Yeah, good shout. I love it. We're going through it over here at the moment. Yeah. But there was a post that you posted that really kind of triggered me to get in touch with you. And if you want, I might read it out, okay, to get started so people can get the context.
Yeah.
And you start off by saying some of the hardest parts of design research are the ones that we're not always trained for. And every project where I've listened to people's stories has shifted how I see the world. Many have changed me for the better, but some have left scars. When people share traumatic experiences, these voices can stay with you, and if there's space to process them and let them go. I'm currently in the thick of interviewing Wanu, that correct?
Oh, no. Families.
Family, Wano. I'm probably making absolute hames of this as well.
Oh, no.
For the Kaupapa, with the Southern Initiative, and it's brought back memories of projects where I hadn't yet learned the importance of self-care. Hearing a story isn't the same as living it, but when you listen empathetically over and over without time to breathe, process, and release each one, it builds up. Researchers often learn about ethics in terms of avoiding harm to others, but we also need to learn how to avoid causing harm to ourselves. So if you're working in social impact or hope to one day, please remember the important work doesn't always need to be the heavy work. I love that. Find a heavy balance so you can engage deeply when it matters most. Heavy topics often surface when you least expect it. People bring their whole selves regardless of the scope or of the research questions. So plan for team support and safety processes, even when you think it's a light topic. If you've lived experience, it will hit differently. You might not be the right person for a project if it puts your well-being and ability to stay grounded at risk. Give yourself breathing room. Try to keep interviews to 1 to 2 a day. Cramming them in might keep the timeline short, but it will take its toll on the long run or in the long run. And if you know the work will be heavy, plan for care. If you can, set aside a budget for therapy supervision sessions to debrief and offload as you go. Or use your employer's EAP. Your partner, cousins, friends might not have the emotional capacity to hold it all for you. Block out and protect time to refill your cup. Whatever that looks like for you, book it in and plan around it. It's an essential part of the work, not a nice to have. So there's a whole PDF piece, and I'm going to link to this post in the show notes, or if you're on YouTube, in the description. Go along, like it, share it with your team and so forth, because it's a great post. Rachel, the question I have, first of all, to get it started, first of all, thanks for writing this post. And second of all, as a freelancer, where does the responsibility lie in that self-care piece if you're working with your clients?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it ultimately lies with yourself if you're freelancing. I think that's always the challenge, right? Is you don't have that team around you. And I'm really lucky that most of my clients very much feel like my team. And that is really lovely. I have clients who have really looked after me in these projects and other ones. But I do think ultimately, if you're running your own business, you need to be budgeting for self-care. You need to be putting aside that money and that time, and you need to be designing it into your day-to-day, because at the end of the day, you are your own employer. Yeah, so I think you have to do it. So that's what I think.
The responsibility piece is depending on how you frame it, is interesting, because if you're working in a space like you have, by the sounds of it, and your employer pays for, or say the client in this instance, or the employer pays for it, I was also pretty kind of suspicious over the relationship potentially with the psychologist and the agency that you're working with.
Yeah.
And not saying that any duty of care could potentially be broken between the psychologist and the employer, but if the work is contentious, I'd love to get your thoughts on the best approaches for that, because I think I have a lived experience in that space. I didn't trust the people that were paying my bills.
Yeah.
And if they flagged something, they're like, I want to work in this project. It's my decision. And I didn't want them to say, actually, you know what, we could probably take you off this project.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a complex situation.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, there's responsibility, but there's also finances, right? Really practically speaking, things like therapy are not cheap, and most people can't afford it. So I think from a really practical perspective, EAP makes sense if that's just what you can afford.
Absolutely. And, so for people overseas, what does EAP mean?
Sorry, I think it's like employment assistance program.
Okay.
Usually it just means therapy that you can access through your employer. But obviously if you're freelancing, that's not a thing. So that conflict of interest thing is really interesting. And I think if you are in a situation where you can afford to get it independently, great. I just don't think that's the reality for most people.
I know. Yeah, if you're like, I was lucky, I was able to do it like private healthcare in Australia, but I think it was about $200 an hour for psychology.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to have it. Like, not only did it help me, but it actually helped the project as well, because they were interested in the topic and they were able to support me. So the person was almost like an extended version of the team for
amazing.
me being the team. So where does this come from in your own perspective? Because you said that there was lots of conversations that echoed, your sort of previous experience. Are you okay to talk about some of this stuff?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So this project that I've been working on, it kind of brought up memories for me from working on topics probably about 6 years ago, when I worked at a really amazing little social change agency, which was called Innovate Change. And I went from a kind of corporate design agency straight into the deep end in the social impact sector. And I think my first project was on homelessness in New Zealand, and specifically Auckland. Things like heart disease, mothers' mental health, drug and alcohol addiction. So quite quickly getting into some really, really intense, heavy topics. And while that was amazing, and I had a super supportive, incredible team around me who did put the right safety processes in place, I was very naive, and I didn't know the importance of some of these practices and didn't prioritize them enough. And so I think now when I do this kind of work, I get a little bit of a red flag in my head, and it reminded me to take a moment and to pause and to think about, what did I learn from those previous projects, and therefore what do I need to put in place this time when I do this work. So although I shared it with other people, it was really just a reminder for myself to really think more intentionally about how I was going to protect myself and therefore the other people in this project I was working on. So that's kind of where it came from in those previous projects I worked on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too often we think this just happens if you're working in the social impact space, but it can work across when you're looking into other people's lives.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at, you mentioned there being naive when you went into those, and you had the support network around there.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about what the mindset was like at that point? Like, obviously there was probably a strong fire and a burning inside that you wanted to do good.
Oh yeah.
And that's very typical when I coach people who are starting out. Like, I just want to fix everything.
Yeah. 100%.
So walk me through what your mindset was like at that time.
Oh, I was just eager for it. It was my dream job. Anything, like we said about the word gnarly, the gnarlier the topic, the more interested I was. The gnarlier. So as soon as my manager at the time said, do you want to work on this homelessness project? I'm like, oh, of course, it sounds amazing. And I just didn't know what I was really getting myself into. I think as designers, we do have the mindset and the belief that we can and should change the world. And that's a very powerful belief to have, but it's also a huge responsibility if you are going into complex places where you can't change things. And then you hear these stories about these broken systems and how it's impacting people's lives. And you walk away with that weight and you hold it for a very long time. So
if you could go back,
yeah.
Imagine we had this magic wand, and we went back to that time, and you were able to spend 1 minute with Rachel at that time, and you could say something for 1 minute into their ears to prepare them. What would it be?
Oh, I don't think you can prepare someone in terms of what they will hear if they've had a safe upbringing, because I just don't think you can prepare for that. But I would just say to younger Rachel, I'd say get supervision right now, like start it now, or seeing a therapist, because I didn't end up finding someone that I liked at the time and didn't see someone regularly. It meant I just kept holding on to those stories, and they're still in my head now. So I haven't properly let them go, and they just stay with you, and
They
that can
do.
impact how you are as a person. So yeah,
Yeah.
that would be my very practical advice. And don't do so many in a row, because I went from
Yeah.
the kind of corporate world where you could do 5 interviews in a day because it kind
Yeah.
of really hurt your head, but it didn't hurt your heart. But going into this
Yeah.
kind of work, you just can't rush it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Like, so there's a whole generation of young, eager to
Yeah.
learn designers, and they're struggling
Yeah.
to get what would be called a corporate, if you want, like a job, like getting into an internship or whatever it is.
Mm.
And they're looking for any opportunities.
Yeah.
As a result, when they're so desperate to get a break, there's potentially there a risk that they're happy to do things where they're unprepared for.
Yeah.
So what do we need to do as a craft, as an industry, as a faculty, if you want, to support that next generation of designers? It's as we mentioned, it is expensive to go to therapy.
Yeah.
There's other services out there online. One in particular I want to call out is called BetterHelp. I tried that and they were absolutely awful. Turns out they're not actually licensed. Many of them
Okay.
they're just
Not
I think
good.
they're just therapists who've got certificates and stuff. I remember explaining, I had a session with one of them and they were like, "This is just an amazing story." And I go, "Sorry, what?" They go, "Yeah, your whole childhood, it's so chaotic." And I was like, "Sorry, what?" I was like, I'd never, that's when I started, like, so BetterHelp, I want to call out, I've had not, that they're not the option here, a cheaper online version of it.
Yeah.
But if you had to say to maybe educators in the design world who are helping form these designers through academia,
Yeah.
have you heard of any academic institutions that are really thinking like this? Because it's a huge area. Like, most designers
Yeah.
that I'm learning about now and I'm seeing, they want to do good. They want to work in the social space. They want to work in governments. They want to research with people out there.
Yeah.
In the context of their homes in some instances. So there's lots of situations that can be quite difficult to navigate.
Oh yeah.
Socially and safety as well.
Yeah.
I
think there are definitely places doing it well. I think whether or not there's many places doing it well in design, like I feel like for a long time designers have been trying to advocate for their own value, and I'd really advise designers and people learning about design to learn from outside the design discipline, because there's people who've been doing this work for years and years and years, and we can just learn from them. So there is an element of design education incorporating those skills and that experience into what they're doing. But I also think there's a piece of, if you're interested in this space, go learn from the experts who've been doing it for a very long time as well. So I think it's a bit both.
There's definitely, there's Rachel Deacus, who I mentioned there before, opened, when I went through all of this stuff 10 years ago, from where we're at then to where we're at now, I think the industry is much more aware and they're happy to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Rachel is writing a book on trauma-informed design on MIT at the moment, or with MIT, should I say, and really opened my mind to it. So there's people out there as well that really speak about the importance of self-care. So maybe we could, myself and yourself, could think of a few others that we can put links to in the show notes for people to follow and read about and so forth. So it'd be nice to have a bunch of resources, because this is a really important topic. In the post that you mentioned there, there's a few other aspects about defining heavy topics. Okay. Now, how do we, if we me and you do a Miro board and we list out all the heavy topics that we think are there, that's only our own perspective on what a heavy topic is. How does someone self-identify what a heavy topic is in your experience?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And you're so right, it is subjective. Like, people who work on the front lines hear this kind of stuff all the time. So what is heavy to them would be quite different. I think it comes down to what you notice gives you a reaction. It's when you start to feel your heartbeat change, and it's when your stomach goes tight. It's when, we use the word triggering probably too much these days, but when it does trigger a response in you, whether that's shock or disgust or heartbreak, whatever that is, I think that is heavy, and that needs a bit of wraparound support around it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that will surprise you what that topic is.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've got an instance in this where I was researching for a bank years ago,
Yeah.
maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, and
Yeah.
it was around money management. And, money is important in the world, but I naively entered a conversation
Oh, yeah.
with a woman
Mm.
who started to cry when we're talking about access to funds. And when you have that realization where you're just going to go, it's like this little slowly but surely everything goes into slow motion. I'm like, oh no. I said, I've hit an absolute sore point.
Yeah.
It turns out there was domestic issues there, and there was control, and there was manipulation, and there was all these awful topics. And it was the one research session that the CIO decided to sit in the bank. And in my mind, I was like, well, this is real. I said, it's not a transaction. This is what we're talking about here. So even something that we can think of like, oh, I'm working in the financial sector.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I think
that's why I called it out. I think it's so easy to make the assumption that, just because you've defined your research scope, that there won't be things outside of that. So I think you're better off if you're doing any form of research with people about their lives. I just think you're better to plan for what will that support look like for you and for them. And if you don't need it, great. But if you do, you've already planned it.
You're ready.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned there a lot of the stuff that you've learned, and this is across the board, folks. Nearly everyone that I work with and I have worked with are exactly the same as Rachel. They've learned on the job. They've learned through failures, micro failures, all of those different pieces. How do you kind of avoid those repeated mistakes when you're finding them? Because when you're researching, it's easy to kind of navigate, but sometimes there's this kind of area where you kind of go, well, actually, there's probably a rich terrain of information, and I'm curious about that. What are the signs that you look for when you're researching to say, well, actually, is it? How would you approach that inner curiosity versus balancing? I might be going into a gray area in terms of in that area, because when you're researching, you're like, actually, I'd love to understand that one a little bit more,
Yeah, I know. I think this is where a lot of it has really challenged what I was taught about research. So if I think of a recent example where a mother was telling me about her experiences of support services, it was very clear that, and she described this herself, that trust is a challenge for her, and there's very, very good reasons for that. And so immediately for me, I kind of realized I need to be very careful about my curiosity, because she needs to be in control in this interview. I said that up front. She doesn't have to answer any questions, but there is an inherent power dynamic if you are giving a gift or money or anything to acknowledge their time. When there's confidentiality, anything like that where there's a power dynamic, I immediately went, no, actually, this could be a short interview, and I might not dive into particular areas because I know that she'll be thinking in the back of her head that there are risks around disclosing any of that information.
Okay.
So I think so much of it is just, yes, listening to what people are saying, but listening to how they're saying it and how comfortable they sound, and asking yourself, is the most important thing here getting a juicy quote, or is it actually keeping that person and their family safe after this?
The extractive
and
it's very easy. That's why I think it's so important to select the right researcher. If you look at someone who's relatively new to it, how they determine their own self-worth, trying to get this articulated correctly, is through rich quotes and rich reflection points that can really, in their world, transform, and increase the chances of action-based stuff within the project. Too often, we may go too far, in my perspective. I mean, I'd love to see, I've never done it. I'd love to do a series of research for a client someday. It's going to go, do you know what? Started asking the questions and I just realized it was just not, it just wasn't appropriate to ask some of these questions.
Yeah.
They go, what?
Yeah.
They would not be able to, most clients I think would really struggle with that. So, talk to me about where and how you're learning. You mentioned there about learning on the job. And you seem like the sort of person who's doing a lot of internal reflection and continuous learning and reading and stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you find areas? First of all, how do you find areas within your own skill set that you need to improve on? And second of all, how do you select the right educational practice?
Oh, far out. Good questions. Okay, so the first one, how do you find areas that you need to focus on?
As a researcher.
Yeah, as a researcher, I think the best way for me to figure that out is working with other people, because that's when you see that they have skills or knowledge, expertise that you don't have, and that you have so much you can learn from them. Yeah. So that's my favorite way to figure that out. And that's why I love working with other people like my mate Katarina Davis, who has all this expertise within Te Ao Māori, the Māori world. Working with people like that, it just constantly challenges you. You have to rethink everything you do. So I think that's a really, really wonderful way to figure out where you can stretch yourself or where you can grow. In terms of the formal education stuff, I'm not so good at that. Speaking of self-care, I'm not someone who actually listens much to podcasts or reads books about work. And that came very much from needing to switch off from work. When I started working on these really intense projects, I think I drew a line that I need to read escapism. I need to read fantasy or something like that takes me completely out of my work. So when I want to learn, really for me, it is learning from people. That's what I find works for me best, but other people learn in lots of different ways.
Absolutely. I think that works for you and you've identified it. I'm keen to understand more around the reflection pieces though. Like, are there any other, you mentioned there maybe you see a therapist as well, like, to maintain, both mental health and practical capacity when you're working in these areas. Is there any reflective practices that you use in terms of what's happening in the industry? So you can see maybe at the moment there's a huge homelessness problem across the world. So when you're working in those spaces, is there something out there, or is there anything out there that you can point at and say, well, actually there's an area that I need to be able to navigate potentially harmful situations physically? I know I've spoken to researchers. They said I've been in situations where I've had to, get out very quickly. Is that something that's in your consciousness when you're researching a person? How you actually navigate that world?
Like physical safety in that situation.
Physical safety. How do you approach those topics? Because I've had people at the moment, they went out and they were knocking on doors, which was like, first of all, that's a recipe for disaster. And there was a sword. There was a sword on one of the couches. And I'm like, so what happened? And this is how I left very quickly. Because there was a weapon. And I go, perfect. But also door knocking is very, kind of guerrilla style for a start. But
that's pretty extreme.
Pretty extreme, So how do you, is that something that's ever in your consciousness that people can, because it seems that whenever we're researching that it could be in a room, or it could be in a work setting, that you could trigger these areas and something could happen.
So I've definitely been in situations in the past where we have been interviewing in homes. There were a whole lot of processes around that, though, in terms of being introduced by a trusted person, often a social worker, and making sure we were going in as peers. So never being on your own, having someone call you before and after the interview. So there were a whole lot of kind of
Okay.
safety processes around that. But I think these days, so much of my work is online, and because I'm freelancing now, if a client asks me about doing a project like this, I can not only say, well, I'd need all of these things in place to make sure that I'm safe. I can also have the conversation around, is that the best approach? Does that person want me to come into their home, or would they actually prefer we have a phone conversation, because then it's a lot more confidential. They can stop at any point. They don't have a complete stranger coming in. So I think there's a lot bigger kind of spectrum around the approaches, what's best for both people. So that's usually the conversation I'll start with, I think.
As a freelancer, and you're being brought into projects, is there ever a case where they're expecting you to go out on your own to do the research?
Into homes?
No, just generally go out and do the research on your own.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been doing these interviews with families on my own, but they've been phone calls mostly, and a few video calls. So from a physical safety point of view, that is a lot simpler to deal with.
Yeah, 100%.
I've not been asked to go into homes or to go out into the community to do research on my own yet. I'll kind of cross that bridge if I get to it. But that, there's a whole lot of things you need to put around that to make sure both parties are safe in that.
Because I see, like, the design research industry in particular, lots of people being laid off, but the requirement is still there to do the research. So as a result, the gig economy is only going to grow more. And as a result, the standards could drop. That's my concern, that if more and more people do design research in a freelance capacity, the client, the employer, whatever you want to call them, they could really shed that responsibility in saying it's on your own. And as a result, you're at the discretion. There is a power dynamic. They're paying you.
Yeah, sure.
You need to do the job. I think we need to stand firm on some of those things. Like if you're being asked to go out, you need to be shadowed by another person at least. I'm white, I'm a man, I'm 6'2", I'm not, easily kind of taken hold of. I think in those situations, balancing the situation with risk is more often than not considered enough in those situations. Have you are you okay to talk more around some of the other elements that are in that carousel, like sure. around breathing room? Because there was a piece that I remember talking about limiting your research to 2 sessions a day. And I'd come from banking and finance and startups, and I was like, let's do 6 a day.
Efficiency. Yes. As
a flex.
Yeah.
Where did that realization come from you? That 2 is probably enough.
That one has a bit of a story behind it. So I think I might have mentioned I came from, a more kind of corporate or design agency world. So that was where we'd go on road trips and, do 5 interviews a day and you'd be exhausted, but it was all kind of head exhaustion. I then kind of tried to apply that same logic in the social impact sector. And that was when I was working on the homelessness project with Auckland Council. And there is one story in particular, and I won't go into it in too much detail, but just to demonstrate the point. So a mother had come into our studio to share her life experiences with me. And essentially she was telling me about how unstable her son's kind of early childhood had been. They moved around multiple places and couch surfed and didn't have any kind of stable home. And she told me how when he got older, he essentially passed away from a drug overdose, and she blamed herself for that. So when you hear stories like that, and you have booked an interview for the next hour, you have half an hour between them, your only option, I think, is to push that emotion down and to go numb just to cope with going from hearing that story and being human in that moment with that person, and then going straight into another conversation with someone about their experiences. So I think that story in particular and that woman in particular, obviously you can hear, it still weighs on me pretty heavily. I can still remember her story in detail, and that's a real reminder for me that you can't cram these things in. You have to create space, because if you don't process them and let them go as you go, they will stay with you, and it's not a good thing if they stay with you. So that one in particular.
It's interesting. Are you okay to keep talking about more around these topics? Yeah, you're okay. Someone said to me years ago, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Like, I'm a highly sensitive person, a HSP. Okay, so I take things and I wear them in terms of what people say to me, and I carry them with me, even though like I might play off and that. Oh yeah, that doesn't bother me. It does bother me, like, when someone says those things. Someone said to me years ago, maybe HSPs aren't the right people to do research. And I'm like, well, what's the alternative? You get sociopaths? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, so people who don't really empathize and don't really carry those pieces across. Do you think there's a certain type of person that gravitates to research? And is that a valid point that someone made to me years ago about, like, maybe you shouldn't do research? And I was like, and I'm like, it still lingers, that question. And it was in Australia, and I'm like, I actually, it triggered something really, visceral. I was just like, what do you just say that I shouldn't do research? Like, I was like,
how dare you?
I was like, how dare you? But it really got me thinking, like, is there something in that?
Yeah. I have
What's your take on it?
I have thoughts on that. So there was two parts. So the first one was, do you think a particular type of person is drawn to research? I think absolutely. You have to be interested in humans.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not curious about humans and their experiences, you will not enjoy research, because that is your job. It is to be a professional learner about people and their lives. So yes, I think it makes sense if you're drawn to it. Whether or not you're the right person to do the job, if you have, a high level of empathy.
Yeah.
See, I think there's a couple of bits there, because if you don't get any great quotes, if they say at the end of that conversation, I'm sorry, I don't want you to use that interview, that it's irrelevant. They need to be able to walk out of the room feeling like they were heard and they were safe. I think that's your number one. So
100%.
You don't want people to be doing this work who aren't making those people feel heard and okay in the moment. I think that's the most important thing. Whether or not highly sensitive people can look after themselves well, that's a different question, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you need to be able to look after yourself and cope. And I think the point where you can't, either in a project or in your career, that's when, stepping away might be the right thing for you. But I don't think it's
you can categorize people.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that. It's about, is it still working for the person you're interviewing and for yourself?
I think at that point, when someone said that to me, that it was a case that I was starting probably to unravel on that project. I was like saying, there was lots of stuff going on. My first child was on its way, and I was working in a space where very young children were being abused, and there was definitely days where I'm like, I just can't function. Like, this is just too much for me. My brain. So maybe there's something in it, maybe there's not, but I think it's contextual to the person and the topic as well, if you're able to do it. One of the pieces that you mentioned, and I just want to go back to it a little bit more, is this whole kind of mirroring scenario of our own past, our own childhoods, and our own kind of adolescence and stuff. When you're researching in those spaces, sometimes it can become quite triggering. And you might know what that past trauma is without professional assistance. So you might kind of go, yeah, okay, I've got some lived experience in that. And lived experience is kind of, it's powerful.
Yeah.
But at certain times that power shifts into a damaging power.
Oh yeah.
So like, how do we ensure that we're selecting the right person with lived experience and that they're being supported in the correct way? So we're not just hiring for that lived experience and then they're reliving that trauma.
Yeah. I think
What are
so
your
much of
thoughts
it
on that?
is. I think so much of it is. I think it's the consent and the boundaries around that lived experience, right? It's like, yes, I have that lived experience, but you have to consent to using that or leaning into that in your work. And I think that's an ongoing thing. You might say, yes, one day I can cope with that and that's okay. And then the next day you might say, actually, I can't today. I need to be able to step away because this is impacting me too much. But I do think there's sometimes seems to be a bit of an assumption that if you have lived experience, you're the best person to be leading that work or doing those interviews. And I think sometimes it can be the opposite because you can't step away from it. You have a really strong bias from your own experience. It brings up really hard things. It brings up a reaction. And you can't stay grounded or you can't treat that other person as the expert. So I don't think it's black and white. Again, I think it comes down to the person and the project and the moment and the context.
Yeah. Can I talk to you a little bit more around refilling the cup?
Yeah.
The refilling the cup, because
that's a nice one.
Yeah, no, I think it's a potentially a lighter part of the conversation. So, how do you identify with your cup being full or empty? Like, what are the physical and mental identifiers that you look for?
Really practically speaking, I just know it's if I've spent time outside. Like it can be that straightforward for me. So, for example, getting out on my bike or getting into the garden are like the non-negotiables. I have to do it because I notice the difference in my mood and my patience is completely different if you're not kind of getting that adrenaline out of your system. So those are super, super important for me. And I do that every day and then prioritize it more so if I'm doing these kinds of projects. So you can look for how you're feeling as a person, but you can also just go, I need to do these things and I will just do them and commit to them.
Yeah. And you're in Wellington as well. So it's an awful place to be out and about. Like, it's just, the air is only joking. It's one of the most special places on earth.
It's beautiful.
So you're absolutely spoiled for that. Yeah. But in terms of the cup needing to be refilled, is there instances where, because I actually speaking to a few people at the moment who are, I'm probably in that camp as well, where I'm getting close to burnout. How do you, has that something has happened to you? I'd love to know, like, and what have you done to try and, refill the cup and take care? Like, is there any systems that you have in place to make sure that you're preempting the burnout, you're preempting that you're close to those mental health red flags, if you want, when you're researching? Because we become much more effective, I believe, as human beings when your cup is there, like,
Yeah, totally. I don't know about formal systems. I mean, I have a human being, my husband, who is extremely helpful at measuring kind of how I'm doing and how full my cup is or isn't.
Yeah, there you go.
So I think he is probably my human system for checking in on how I'm going and whether or not I need to do some things to refill that cup. He's a big part of that, for sure.
Yeah.
But
there was something years ago, like... I think that the other people in your life is a really solid answer to that. They usually see things that you don't see, or like, maybe you should go for a walk. Why? Because you're being really difficult. And that's one that when my wife says it to me, I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, it's been a tough day. But I remember Hector Garcia, who was on the podcast a couple of years ago, and he wrote a couple of books in Ikigai. He's a fantastic thinker, and he spoke about this this word that is eluding me at the moment in Japanese culture, about these a number of adventures that you schedule throughout the year
Cool. Yeah.
to help maintain the cup.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I love that. And he says, yes, but it's with intent. It's not just like we stumbled upon this thing this day. It's like, you know, that there's these pieces that are scheduled throughout the year, and that's already in the calendar. You've planned the year from the get-go, and you know that in March you're climbing this, or in June you're going to be doing this, and it's only 2 or 3 days. I thought that was a really nice way of helping maintain the cup being a little bit more full than empty.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Probably resonates more when you're in New Zealand. You kind of go bungee jumping there. We could go, and obviously.
I think you're right in terms of when you talk about burnout. I think many New Zealanders have had a bad habit, including myself, where you kind of just push yourself through the winter and wait for this big long summer break. Whereas I think now we have Matariki, the Māori New Year, in the middle of winter. And so even having those kind of those reminders to take a moment and to celebrate what's been and look back and look forward, and taking that time to look after yourself in the cold, dark months. I think even those things can help you to plan those getaways.
Is that around solstice? Is that around June 21?
Yeah, we just had it just last week.
Okay.
So it goes for a long time, but we have the anniversary or the weekend.
Yeah. We call it solstice, and it comes from Druids and pagans in Ireland, so I celebrate it too as well, which is fantastic. Rachel, there's so much stuff that we could unpack more, and I'd like to invite you back onto the podcast whenever you want, onto the podcast, should I say. If people want to follow you and connect with you and maybe speak about opportunities to work, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn is always a great way these days. Or just find my email on LinkedIn. I always love to chat with good people doing good work. So
maybe we could put your email in the show notes. Would that be?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I think we can do that as well. It's fantastic to speak with someone, one, who's freelance. I love the fact that you're freelance, and that gives us a certain amount of autonomy to select the projects.
Yeah.
What kind of projects float your boat?
Anything in the social impact or environmental space. I know that's very broad.
Nice and broad, yeah. Nice and
broad. No, what I've kind of learnt over the years, so I have a couple of friends who have founded charities. The kinds of people who have a vision, have this one thing that they're passionate about, and they just do it, and that is brilliant. I've learnt that I don't have that one thing, that one topic, but what I love is working with people who are already doing the hard work and just making it a little bit easier for them. So just giving their work a bit more clarity or a little bit of a boost. I don't have the resilience to do the front of house kind of frontline work. I've learnt that. But I really, really love just supporting those people who are doing the hard work, and making it easier.
Nice. Rachel, listen, look, I wrap up every podcast that I do by thanking people for their time, their energy, and their vulnerability, because we're speaking about topics here that they matter. So thank you for giving me your time and your evening as well, because I know I'm cutting into your very, very important New Zealand TV time.
We don't have a TV.
You don't have a TV?
We don't have a TV.
But I know I'm cutting into your evening. So I really appreciate you giving me that opportunity to spend some time with you.
Thanks so much.
I'll put a link to everything that you're doing, put a link to that post as well, so you can look at it and download the PDF. And I'd encourage you, as the listeners, to connect with Rachel, but also to share that PDF and share that post out to the people in your team to start having conversations around these things. This is what we're all about here, and this is HCD. So if you've got any questions, point you towards Rachel. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Gerry. It was lovely to chat.